Hey everybody, Max here, and today I'd like to wish you a Happy New Year 2026. This is not my first video of 2026, but it is my first recorded video of 2026, and I thought, why not start off this year right with doing something that I have been meaning to do for about a year now. This is go over a G.I. Joe Comics retrospective and review of the Kickstarter hardcovers. Now I'm not, because the Kickstarter's been over a year, it's over a year old now, and I've had these for exactly a year. Um, this is going to be more just an overview of the series as a whole. So I hope to do all 4 volumes. You can get the first 2 volumes in paperback, and the third one should be coming out in February, March of this year, 2026. And then I think probably the 4th volume is later in the year, or maybe this time next year. So this is for, for my own comic love. Yes, most of my videos are of figures related to G.I. Joe and Marvel Legends and all this other stuff, but all of that stuff has to do, a lot of it, with my love for comic books. Now, of course, as a kid, I was more into more into toys, Star Wars, G.I. Joe before the comics, but when the comics came out, I really fell in love with the idea of tied-in medium, and it just, cartoons and comics and movies and TV shows and stuff, just it made the play more enjoyable and inspirational as well. It kind of gave you things that you could recreate and stuff. And so I have, I aged out, of course, of toy collecting in, my early teens and everything, but comics stayed with me. And the first comic series that I ever collected was G.I. Joe. And so this will always have a special place in my heart, this particular series. And so that's why I wanted to just kind of gush for a bit about that. And so this is volume 1, and we'll just kind of dive in here and go over everything. And I am going to try and make this video 30 minutes or less, but bear with me if it's a little longer, because this is not the first time I've tried to record this video. And I ended up going over every single issue, and it was like 40 minutes before I ever got to issue 17. So I'm going to try and trim it down and do more of an overview. But if you want a longer form video at the end of this, you want to see more content, or you have specific questions, let me know in the comment section and I'll do a longer video. But this is the hardcover, as I said, snake eyes on the front, and nice embossed, recreation of, I think this is issue 53, and great classic cover, Compendium 1. I got obviously the Joe set, and also got this, all 4 volumes signed by Larry Hama at Joe Lanta in September of 2025. So, and that was actually the second time that I'd met him. I met him at Joe Fest 2025 and got him to sign a few things, but I didn't take these with me because I was afraid they'd get damaged. But I live closer to where Joe Lanta is held, so I could just drive over there, bring these with me, and he was nice enough to sign them. So yeah, so got that taken care of. So this is definitely, I'm never parting with these. And also, bear with me, this is the first time I have done a review of a compendium or a hardcover or an omnibus or anything like that. So just give me some grace here if I trip up on a few things. But here are the credits. So if you want to pause the video and read over that, you can. Obviously, Larry Hama is the primary architect of the G.I. Joe comics lore, as well as doing the file cards for the uh, the uh, the figures that we had as a kid, as well as all the pencilers. And so a lot of people worked on these first 50 issues. So this volume covers 1 through 50, and some would argue that this is the best volume, the best the best run, the first 50 issues. Now, I don't agree with that, because it kind of implies that the series fell off after issue 50, and it certainly did not. Now, but I will say that a lot of the foundation for the lore in the comics comes from these first 50 issues, obviously. So pause the video if you want to read these credits. Lots and lots of people. And then we just dive into issue 1. Now, that's the one criticism that I have about this, is that they didn't do a table of contents so that you know where issues are and what page number and everything. And there are no page numbers anywhere. So, and that's kind of a bummer. But there is a ribbon in here, so you can keep your place and everything. And I'm glad that they recreated all of the covers. That's always something that I can deal with it not having table of contents or anything like that. But some people criticize. But as long as you give me the covers, I feel like I feel ripped off if a collection doesn't have the covers, because that's just a great way to delineate the start and stop of a particular issue. So yeah, so G.I. Joe #1, obviously Operation Lady Doomsday. So this is where we meet the OG-13 classic cover there. Have a recreation of this one signed by Larry Hama as well. That came out from Skybound. I have read and reread, never had the original. I came into the line around the second year of this, and I'll go into that story in a minute, but I did have a friend who had a huge reproduction of issue 1. I'm talking, it was like as big as a coffee table. It was an enormous enormous recreation of this. So I got to see and read this in like just very large, blown up. And oh, and one other thing, the compendiums are not oversized like an omnibus oversized. They're not, the artwork's not blown up or anything. This is essentially the same dimensions as a standard comic book is today. So just bear that in mind. So, which is fine. Some people complained about that during the Kickstarter. I didn't have a problem with it. This is a great collection. The artwork is recreated. We see G.I. Joe, Cobra kidnapping this, what is her name? Adelaide Burkhart, kind of a peace, love, pacifist kind of lady, but she has something to do with the Joint Chiefs and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of ironic that she's against the military, but the military has to go and rescue her from Cobra. We see General Flag for the first time, and then he calls up the G.I. Joe team, and this is the original 13 with Shooter, which his face obscured, and that was a throwback to Jim Shooter, who was the editor at the time of Marvel Comics. He has since passed away. Rest in peace. He was a great, fantastic editor. No matter what people might say, he oversaw so much great stuff at Marvel during the 80s, and G.I. Joe was one of them. So since then, it's been retconned that Shooter is now a woman. And I think both I don't know if she appeared in the Real American Hero continuity. No, she's in the Energon. And then we see the Pit. We see Colonel Hawk before he's a general, Snake Eyes, Stalker, Grand Slam, Clutch. All of these guys, they got to go to an island which is labeled Cobra Island, but not the Cobra Island we will come to know and love later on in the series. They have to go and rescue her. So lots of great art by Herb Trimpe and the Trimpe, I think that's how you pronounce it. And then the colors recreation is great. The paper stock for this is more of a matte finish, not gloss, obviously, as you can probably tell. And the compendiums, the trade paperback size or style, that is newsprint. So, and I've looked through that a few times when I've been in the bookstores, and you can get them everywhere. You can get them off of Amazon and order them different places, Barnes and Noble, but it's newsprint style paper, so it kind of tries to recreate the original feel and look of the original comics. So you pretty much everything is introduced in this first issue. You see pretty much all of the vehicles that were released during the toy line in '82. Now, there were no Cobra vehicles at all in that first run, so you don't see any new. They had to make up some Cobra vehicles for the first 10, 12 issues of the comic. So, and this is awesome. You get this great fold out or two-page spread of the Pit, and unfortunately there is some gutter loss because of that, and I'm sure you'll probably, because they're so thick, you're going to see some gutter loss, but that's not a big deal. But I did love this particular this two-page spread when I was a kid. I love the cutaways of various hideaways and headquarters of superheroes, and then you have a backup story of some of the Joes going on a mission where they are trying to get some information out of this particular country. And there's a lot of fictional countries in the G.I. Joe lore that stand in for different countries, maybe like Colombia or Libya or East Berlin, stuff like that, because this is written during the height of the Cold War. So, and then we have issue 2. And issue 2, I've never read this issue until I read it here. So yes, all of the original Marvel run has been reproduced and published in trade paperback form when IDW inherited the license. But this is, I never read them. I guess I've only recently, in the last few years, gotten back into G.I. Joe with classified line and everything, and then Skybound starting up the series again with 301, issue 301. But issue 2, back in the day, was one of those rarest comics. I mean, it was going for just high dollars back in the day. It was very hard to find. Even reproductions. I never saw a reproduction until, gosh, Joe Fest. And but I mean, I had this already, and so this is a really solid story of one team going into the Arctic to investigate an American Arctic base getting hit, and then investigating to see if it's Cobra. And we get Scarlet, Snake Eyes, Breaker, and Stalker, and they fly up there. And this is where we meet Quinn, and I would love to see him. I want a classified figure of Quinn so bad. And he is an Eskimo mercenary who has a very unique code of honor. So he's working for Cobra, and or was it a? We see a Soviet site. So is there also a Soviet site? And but anyway, they're checking this out, seeing if there was a, what's going on here. American base got hit. Looks like a Russian base too. And then they fall into conflict with Quinn, who is definitely working for Cobra, trying to get some information and technology that Cobra wants, but he understands that he's working for Snakes and the Joes are more honorable, but he has a contract and he has a code. So he doesn't want to harm them, but he can't let them mess with their mission. But he, to the letter of his contract, he does deliver the goods to Cobra, but he also leaves it open for the Joes to come and stop Cobra. So, and then we will see him again. And then 3, 4, and 5. I had issues 3, 4, and 5. Yeah, they were probably reprints, and they came in a bag, and I got them off of a spinner rack and in a toy store, I think, or Hills or someplace. And they're just one-off issues of Cobra trying to find the Joe base, and then team of Joes incorporating or infiltrating um, a militia team, a militia group. And this is one of the only times we ever hear Snake Eyes' internal monologue is right here, where he is writing his notes as he's doing some observations, and some great artwork from Herb Trimpe. Didn't really appreciate his art at the time, but he definitely has a Jack Kirby style, and really appreciate it now. And in this first year or so is just kind of the team, the comic finding its footing, and just one-off issues or missions and that sort of thing. Issue 5, we see the Mobats, and they go on a parade, but they don't have any armament or ordnance, and yet Cobra attacks, trying to kidnap General Flag, I believe, and they have to fight back in a creative way using bubblegum, and that's why Breaker has the new classified Breaker has the bubblegum on his second head sculpt, which is awesome. And we go up against, we see Cobra Commander and the Baroness making an appearance, and General Flag, doing his heroic thing, but getting grazed in the head with a bullet. And then issue 6 and 7 is where we are introduced to the October Guard, and the Joes are going to, I think they're supposed to, they're trying to get some information or technology that's crash landed in Afghanistan or someplace like that. And in the 80s, Russia had invaded Afghanistan, and so America was helping the Afghans fight back against the Russians, and so definitely during the Cold War. But we were introduced to the lovable October Guard, the Russian equivalent of the Joe team, and I never had these 2 issues, but these are a great reread. They have to, initially they're against each other, and then Cobra shows up, and then it's a 3-way battle in the October Guard. They team up with the Joes to fight back against Cobra, and with some great art from Herb Trimpe as well. So definitely a cool 2-parter. And the October Guard show up here and there, and then also they recreated these, kind of the little toy, almost ads, but kind of just an overview of the different vehicles. And then issue 8. Now I actually had this. This is the oldest issue that I had that was first print, and that was actually, which was actually written by Herb Trimpe and drawn by Herb Trimpe. And but yeah, I had this issue, and that was the oldest one of the series. And so this is one of those. I think they're attacking a uh, shuttle launch. Cobra is, and because this is the first year and Cobra didn't have any vehicles, Marvel had to come up with some unique designs of their own, like these walkers and these helicopters, which we have never seen. Wouldn't that be interesting if some of this stuff was actually made in classified scale? And the Joes go and they fight. So in this issue, Joes fight Cobra. Lather, rinse, repeat. But it's always cool. And Larry Hama definitely he's definitely an action-oriented writer. So he is bringing the action every single issue. And so then we have issue 9 with it's a standalone, kind of focusing on Scarlet, kind of a spy mission, and kind of a James Bond style as they're trying to rescue a diplomat or something like that. And then issue 10 is when we are introduced to Springfield, which is Cobra's hometown, and somehow or another they have found, the Joes have discovered, they have wound up in Springfield, and so they're in there, but they get captured, and they don't realize, oh wait, they're taken to Springfield. That's what it is. They're investigating something Cobra related, but then they were kidnapped and taken to Springfield. So they don't ever learn. They know Springfield is a town in America that Cobra has taken over, and this is where they learn that. And this is the first time we see the brainwave scanner, and Snake Eyes is put into that, and we start to see some of foreshadowing of Snake Eyes' background. We're introduced to Billy, who is later shown to be Cobra Commander's son, who's leading a resistance against Cobra, or as a part of a resistance. He's just a kid here, and then we start to see more of, at some point in the brainwave scanner, we are shown that Snake Eyes has some ninja training, and so that's where it's introduced here. But the Joes escape, but they can't. It's like on autopilot. The thing they don't know. They don't know where it is. They're in the same device, same vehicle that brought them there, and they're escaping. And that's kind of like the plot contrivance to explain why they can't. They don't know where Springfield is, and then they have to parachute out. And then we get another one-off in the Arctic. We spend a lot of time in the Arctic in the Joe comic, it seems. And this is where we start seeing some vehicles and some new vehicles. Cobra has I think it was the Viper, their hang glider, and then we see the Polar Battle Bear for the first time. So throughout the run, as toys and new characters are introduced, they have to be shown in the comic. We also see the Hiss tank, and so now, and then we have the foreshadowing of Destro, and they're trying to do something. They're sabotaging, I guess, a Alaskan pipeline or something like that. And and then we have the Falcon, I think is what this is called, the Joe hang glider. I definitely had that, and it came with a repaint of Grunt, and I really loved that thing, but it was made out of styrofoam, and it flew really well, but if it hit something, it tore fairly quickly, so it was not a sturdy toy. And if you had it, you know what I'm talking about. And then we have issue 12. Now this is where I actually initially I had changed schools, moved across town, made a new friend, and he was the one who got me into the comic, and he started reading with issue 12. So he had issue 12. So I was able to read all the way up to the first issue that like the first time I went over to his house, we walked down to the corner store and picked up an issue. But this is also, I feel like, where things start to roll. Like, Larry Hama's found his footing, and there's more of a serialized format to the series. Everything just kind of flows from one storyline. There's foreshadowing, there's new adventures, new plots, new characters, and I really felt like this is where things kind of hit the ground running. So the first year, great, but now we're starting to see more of the lore and more characters and everything. So we are introduced to Scarface, and he's just kind of a Cobra Trooper. We never got a figure of him, but I did have a Cobra Trooper, and I just took a Sharpie or a crayon or something, or a black ink pen, and just, drew on his face, and boom, he was Scarface. And then the Joes are going down here to, I believe this is called Rio Lindo, which is either a city or a country in South America, and we will come back to that from time to time. And then I think this is where we run into Quinn again, Dr. Venom. We never got a figure of that guy. And Dr. Venom really has it in for Snake Eyes, and Cobra has some interest down there. Then boom, Quinn shows up again, and then a really cool storyline ensues as Snake Eyes is captured. The Joe team is captured, but Snake Eyes rescues them, but he gets injured, but that doesn't stop him, and then they get going from there. And then there's a storyline of them, Snake Eyes, Quinn, and Dr. Venom trying to get back to the States, and the Joes trying to fight against, trying to survive against some rebels in this particular country that's probably like a stand-in for like Colombia or someplace like that. And then let's see. And then 14 is when we are fully introduced to Destro and see the relationship he has with Baroness. And so it's really cool. Lots of cool plots, lots of cool storyline here. And another thing is, like, around issue 14, I always had wondered how a team of terrorists like Cobra could exist in America. Well, I didn't remember reading it back in the day, or didn't pay much attention to it, or it just wasn't that important to me. But nowadays it is, and it was kind of like, all right, it shows how they can operate in America and how they stay hidden and everything. And interesting little throwback to Apocalypse Now right there. And as they are trying to get back to the States, and then it's shown here once they get there, Venom is taken out of jail. So Cobra has some friends in high places in the American government, so to keep them out of too much trouble. And then we have more vehicles and more fighting as Destro's kind of making his the name for himself, and Cobra Commander is scared of him, afraid he's going to usurp his power, and so he wants Major Blood to take him out, but Baroness is like, nope, not happening, he's my man. And then, so I think they were attacking, was it Fort Knox, I think? And then some loose ends. And things kind of build, the storyline here from issue 12 into issue 19, builds and culminates in a big battle between Joe and Cobra, and as they figure out where the headquarters is for the Joes. Baroness gets captured. She's burned pretty badly. They capture Scarface and I think Major Blood in here somewhere. And Quinn and Snake Eyes are fighting to get back to the Joe team and help stop. And we see the snake armor, and Snake Eyes kind of stupidly jumps into one of these and doesn't realize that it will control him, and he doesn't control it, but his willpower does win out eventually. And the Joes fake out the Cobras into thinking they have destroyed their base, and this is kind of the design of the toy playset that we had. Well, I didn't have, but I know some people who did. And and this is where kind of there's a kind of in issue 19, like, this is really cool battle and everything, but it happens in Fort Wadsworth, which I think is in New Jersey, and it is an actual base that I think may still be there. And it was kind of like they were Chaplin's assistants, and the Joe's teams were. But it's a huge battle going on, and like right there in New Jersey, and Major Blood, he escapes, shoots General Flag, couldn't think there for a second, and knocks out Doc, shoots and kills General Flag, escapes with the injured Baroness, and then the Scarface gets killed, and then we have Quinn finally having had enough of Dr. Venom. He just thinks he's going to kill him, and then he decides no, he's not going to reduce himself to that, and then Dr. Venom shoots him in the back, but he had a grenade, and it rolls out, and he kills Dr. Venom. And so a lot of these interesting characters that we never got figures for die before the second year is out. So Quinn, Dr. Venom, Scarface, General Flag, we never got figures of those guys, and I would absolutely love to get those. And then after issue 19, we get a standalone issue with issue 20 focusing on Clutch, written by Stephen Grant. Jeff Isherwood is the penciler. Cover by John Byrne. He does a few covers here and there throughout the series. Now, this issue is just kind of a standalone issue, kind of showing the background of Clutch. And I don't know, maybe it didn't sell well, or maybe the people didn't really like it, but I always liked it, and I wish we had gotten more standalone issues with just single adventure, one-off adventures with one of the Joes, kind of giving us a little backstory for who they are and where they come from beyond just what's in the file card. But this is a great. I love this page. He builds his hot rod. I think his brother. He's working for Cobra and he's trying to rescue his family. And this picture right here just has stayed with me forever. Reading that in like 5th grade. And like I said, a friend of mine, he had 12 to 21, and we recreated this little black backpack jetpack scene quite a bit because I had Clutch in the Vamp and I liked him quite a bit. And then of course we get to 21, and I did go back and buy a lot of the as many back issues as I could, but which unfortunately really wasn't that many. I was able to get issue 21 and 20 and a few others, but like I said, issue 8. But a lot of those I just there were reprints here and there. But I definitely had a first print of Silent Interlude, even though I didn't buy it off the stands. And of course, this is the classic silent issue that changed comics. I have this page recreated. Larry Hama sells these, like his original pencils, and then I've got that hanging on a wall. He signed it. And of course, this is a tremendous, tremendous issue, written and drawn by Larry Hama and inked by Steve Lealoa. And if you didn't know, he's also the namesake of Torpedo, and the classified Torpedo even looks like him. So they made him look somewhat like the actual Steve Lealoa. So that is pretty cool. So this is an awesome, awesome issue. Loved recreating these fight scenes here when I was a kid. Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow. Never got any red ninjas. That would have been really, really cool. And nothing against the red ninjas that we've gotten in classified, but I want some that look like that. That would be fantastic. And of course the Claw, love that. And this is where we learned that there's a connection between Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow. And it's kind of funny to hear Larry Hama talk about it in interviews, that when he wrote this, he really didn't have a clue where it was going to go. So in a way, he's very plot-driven, action-driven, focused writer, and but it's always about driving the action forward. So in a way, he's creating things that inspire him, and he has to kind of figure a way out. And then here we are, issue 22. This is the issue, my first issue that I bought off the stands of G.I. Joe. This was the 3rd comic I had ever purchased, but this was the issue that turned me into a comic collector. And it's an absolutely odd issue to start with, because it's the aftermath of issue 19, the big battle in issue 19. And it's kind of weird we have issue 20 and 21 before we have the follow-up. But yeah. But I was able to go back and read the issues from the original run that my friend had, so it caught me up. And this is just where it's just a catch-up. They're trying to make the repairs to the pit, and it's just kind of like a epilogue where Snake Eyes goes and he's going to bury Quinn at sea in the Eskimo fashion. And then we have a new cutaway of the new pit, which is awesome. 1 page on that one. See Cobra, trying to figure out a way to follow up, and we got kind of a hint of the Rattler here. Major Blood's taking the Baroness to I think it's a Swiss plastic surgeon to get her recovered. And I always love this issue as we say goodbye to Quinn. I wish we'd seen more of him. That would have been really awesome. And then we have silent pages as we lay General Flag to rest. And then the kind of Rattler, kind of the pseudo Rattler or prototype Rattler, I guess. I don't think they call it Rattler in this issue. Shows up to shoot and kill the Joes at Arlington. But of course, out of the blue comes Roadblock and Duke, and they shoot this thing down. And I hope there was. I always wondered, like, I hope that landed in an empty field and didn't blow up. Oh, yep, there it is, because that would have been kind of crazy, having an explosion right there in Arlington Cemetery. But then we have Duke showing up, and he's given a pep talk, or a dressing down, I guess, and he's the top sergeant now. And then we see Dr. Venom and a few others. Dr. Venom being laid to rest in Potter's Field, basically a unmarked grave, because nobody knows who they really are. And then issue 23, this is when I became a comic collector. I became a comic collector when I picked up issue 23. And I think somewhere right after this, I got a subscription. And I don't recommend that. They don't do that much anymore, I don't think, if at all. But they would send it in a bag, and a lot of times it would be a little warped, and I'd have to lay it flat, put it under encyclopedias to get it to lay flat again. So, but I did subscribe. And Michael Golden did this cover, I do believe. Great cover, loved it. And this is where the Joes are trying to track down Major Blood and the Baroness, as well as lay a trap for Cobra Commander. And we see more and more action as they capture Cobra Commander. Big deal. They capture him, but he doesn't stay captured for very long, because issue 24, love this issue. The late great Russ Heath drew this. First Mike Zeck cover, always love this. Love the claw. This is the issue where, let's see, where is it? They're basically waiting out. They're waiting, and the Joes are waiting for pickup. They're trying to, sequester Cobra Commander away, but the Cobras find them anyway. And really cool, kind of Strato Fortress there, Cobra Strato Fortress. And then this is where we see the claw not the claw for the first time, but the claw again. And Skyhawk, loved this thing. Loved the claw, loved the Skyhawk. If you haven't seen my video on the Air Eagle, check that out. Great reproduction of the Skyhawk, because the classified team has not given us that yet, but we have gotten the claw. And if you haven't watched that video, check it out. Love the classified version of it. Great update. And lots of fighting and everything. And you see the Fang. And they managed to capture Roadblock and Gung Ho, two of the big guns in the Joe team, managed to capture Storm Shadow, because he kind of sacrifices himself so that Cobra Commander can get away. And then we have this foreshadowing of them trying to track down more leads, and it leads them to about Cobra, and then it leads them into the swamp, and we are introduced to Zartan for the first time. So 25 is about Zartan, and the Joe's going down to the bayou in Louisiana. Or is it Florida? Are they like Lake Okeechobee or something? Yep, Florida. Yeah, they're actually in the Everglades. I kept thinking he was in Louisiana. But nope, he's in the Everglades in Florida. So like outside of Miami. And actually went to college in Florida. Had a friend from Clewiston, which is on Lake Okeechobee, just north of the Everglades. And so there we are. And then right here in the middle, we get to issue 26, the origin of Snake Eyes. Now, I was into, so 82 to 85, that would take us to about issue 30-ish, 36. So I was into the comic before the cartoon. The cartoon came out in 85. I got into the comic in 84. So I was into the comic a lot longer than I ever was into the cartoon. The cartoon was fine, but to me, this is the lore, because I was just introduced to Joe comics before the cartoon. So, like I said, the cartoon's fine. Some of the episodes are a little crazy, a little wild, but I just prefer the comic, because Larry Hama brought a more, yes, there's some science fiction elements, but he did bring a lot of military lingo and actual military style ops and lingo, and I mean, yes, he had to incorporate a lot of the fantastical elements of the toy line, but he tried to make it real, tried to make it realistic. I mean, we learned stuff about weapons from reading this that I never thought I would. And these two pages here, particularly this one, is probably one of my favorite pages from the whole run, as we learned that Stalker, Storm Shadow, Snake Eyes were part of a long-range recon patrol team in Vietnam, and what happened to them in Vietnam, and Snake Eyes' origin. We learned that his family is killed, and then Tommy is a ninja and invites him to go to the family business, and they train him to be a ninja. And then come to find out that they Storm Shadow, or Snake Eyes, thought that Storm Shadow had killed or Soft Master. So we have the Hard Master, the Soft Master, and they're the uncles of Storm Shadow, of Tommy Storm Shadow. So, and we think that the Hard Master is killed, and we assume it's by Storm Shadow, but it come to find out, we learned that it isn't. And so, and then we learn how Snake Eyes got injured, why he wears a mask, why he doesn't talk, why he's such a man of mystery, and then there's a running fight as Snake Eyes chases down Storm Shadow in the heart of New York. And this is where Storm Shadow, you realize that he's just infiltrating Cobra, trying to find the actual person who killed the Hard Master. And so that's why seems to be a villain, but he's more of a, he's got a reason for doing what he's doing, and that he and Snake Eyes are, they're so close, they're like brothers. And so into issue 28, we get some more fun in the Everglades, and then we have Beach Whale. Love this cover, man. Man, seeing this cover on the stands just made my heart leap. Those Michael Golden covers were just awesome. Just something about this, just the color of it, and I just love Duke and Roadblock. And the Whale gets a lot of love in the Joe comic, not even in these early issues, but in later issues as well. The hovercraft. My brother had the hovercraft and the hydrofoil. I had a lot of the smaller ones. He saved up for the bigger vehicles, but the Whale was just a fantastic vehicle. Definitely one of the best ones. And then we see the introduction of the Cobra Guard, the Crimson Guard, and they all have red hair and the same face, and they're called Freds. And so let's go here. And so Destro and Firefly have to escape. They're down in the Everglades, and they're trying to get out without being captured by the Joes. And then we have another John Byrne cover. Is this John Byrne? No, I think this is Mike Zeck cover. But Dreadnoks being the Chaos Agents. I'm not a big fan of the Dreadnoks, but they serve a function. It's kind of like, I love Zartan, but I think he's super cool. But the Dreadnoks themselves are kind of annoying. But we see, the Crimson Guards are infiltrating all over the country into different places, observing government officials, blackmail, observing the Joes come and go. And then this is where we are introduced to Billy, or reintroduced to Billy, captured by the Baroness and Major Blood, and they are trying to convince him to, or they will try to convince him to kill Cobra Commander. But the Dreadnoks are sent in to cause some chaos on the Joe base, and the Cobras fight, and the Joes show up, and the Cobras retreat. And then issue 31, absolutely loved this issue here, drawn by Rod Wiggum. Now, Ron Wagner and Rod Wiggum are those are the two artists I most closely associate with as being the G.I. Joe artists, the kind of the quintessential G.I. Joe artists, because they did the most, I think, between the two of them. Herb Trimpe is in the early days, but those two guys, and I loved how they recreated the military, just the vehicles, the Joe vehicles and everything, and they did action very well. And so here we have Destro and Firefly. They're going to be tracking down Snake Eyes in his cabin in the High Sierras. For some reason, Hawk sends Airborne and Spirit to keep an eye on him, but then Destro goes on a road trip, and he just kind of wants some revenge, because he's mad at Snake Eyes for breaking into the Silent Castle and taking he didn't exactly rescue Scarlet. She rescued herself. So, but this awesome firefight happens at his cabin, and we see one of the Freds and Firefly and everything, and just some great gunfire and action here going on. And and then Airborne and Spirit come in to rescue Snake Eyes, but then we see Timber coming to the rescue, and just everybody's getting shot up, everybody's getting winged and damaged and everything, and then boom, and then here's the issue 32, more Dreadnoks, as they're training Baroness and Major Blood training Billy to kill Cobra Commander. And the Joe team, Snake Eyes and Airborne, they're trying to get out of the High Sierras. And you got Destro and Firefly fighting a bear. And this is interesting because Storm Shadow goes back to Cobra Commander. They're in Springfield, and they just walk out. They go from this underground base in their uniforms, their Cobra uniforms, and walk right out into a mall. And, nobody even bats an eye. It's just the Cobra Commander going for a walk. And then we're also seeing some introduction to some new characters, Lady J and Ripcord, because, as new characters were introduced, because these 50 issues take place between 82 and 86, we see a lot of Joes, a lot of new Cobra characters, a lot of vehicles introduced just in those 4 years alone. So just being able to juggle all of that, I just have to commend Larry Hama for all that he did. But he said in interviews that the three Joes that are kind of the link pin for the lore in his mind is Stalker, Scarlet, and Snake Eyes. But he does a great job with Destro, the Baroness. Destro is definitely one of my favorite villains in here because he's he has an honorable code. He's a businessman. He plays both sides. He's an arms dealer, and he just and there's always these shifting loyalties between the hierarchy of Cobra as a whole. And then there's this rally, and we're introduced to Candy Apple, I think that's her name, Bongo the balloon bear, and she gets into a relationship with Ripcord. And then here we are, Billy's about to shoot, and Storm Shadow's looks like he's going to actually kill this kid. But nope, Destro intervenes. He doesn't want to see Cobra Commander get shot, and he doesn't want to see Billy get hurt. But then we were revealed that, oh, this is Billy, the son of Cobra Commander. And there we are. And so this is actually the Joes, the OG-13 are actually being decommissioned. They're going to be going down to they're going to be shifted out of the line, being the front line guys, into being more administrators. But we still see a lot of them here and there. This is where Colonel Hawk is promoted to General Hawk. And then issue 34. This is next to issue 21. 34 is one of those quintessential, just single, awesome issues. And I do have this issue signed by Larry Hama. Like I said, I met him for the first time at Joe Fest 2025, and I got him to sign this. And just, I read this and reread this so much that I actually started to tear the cover off the original copy that I had. I've since bought another one, and that's the one he signed. But me and my brother just poured over this one. I taped it up. I had to retape the cover back on it. I read it so many times, but it's Shakedown, the Sky Striker versus the Rattler. Now, a Tomcat versus an A1 Thunderbolt, completely two different purposes, right? An actual dogfight. The Thunderbolt is not meant for dogfighting. It's a air to ground support vehicle, whereas this is air to air, air to ground. You can dogfight in this guy, but it's kind of hard to dogfight in this thing. But of course, this being Cobra, they modified it, and so it can hold its own against the Sky Striker. So the Wild Weasel and Baroness go up in the Rattler. Lady J and Ace go up in the Sky Striker, and then they're testing out different new equipment on each, and they find each other. They recognize, oh, there's a Cobra in the air. So Cobra sees them, and they decided to attack, and then it's on. And it's just one big dogfight through this whole thing. And of course, they're doing it above some city, in America. This big dogfight. But hey, we're kids, and it's still awesome. And they're just exchanging gunfire and missiles, and it goes into the different tactics and the capabilities of each vehicle, each plane, and all of the tactics and everything. And they're going back and forth, and it just kind of shows you just how awesome a pilot Ace and Wild Weasel are, and how they're trying to fake each other out. And eventually they just run out of ordnance, and they're still flying, and they do this. This is awesome. I've got a t-shirt with this on it. Well, actually, these panels here But it's like, I just love this page. Gun check, empty. Gun check, empty. And they salute each other. Just, you know, the respect shown. I just love that particular issue. And then, of course, you know, it ends with the ladies in the back seat screaming like, "Go after them! What are you doing?" You know, and the guys are just like, "You guys don't, you don't understand. They are equals and they respect each other, even though they're on opposite sides." So, and then 35. This is another John Byrne um, cover with the Dreadnoks. He must have really liked the Dreadnoks. Um, and then we get back into the main flow of things. And let's see, I think actually Mark Bright. So we got Rod Wiggum, Mark Bright, Bob Camp. I'm not sure who he is, but Mark Bright does some pages in here. And he does a short run later on in the series. Great artist. We taken too soon. He died a few years ago, but he did a lot of great comics that I love. Good run on Iron Man, Green Lantern, but he also did some G.I. Joe stuff. So this is a Dreadnought theme issue, and these guys doing more, just breaking in. Just these guys just keep breaking into all these military bases and just doing damage and somehow getting away. And then we got Rock and Roll, Clutch. You know, they're out there. They get roped up in it. And a lot of the hologram technology of, we see that with Zartan. And then we're out to sea. And so now we get into a big storyline of, um, you know, we're going to start seeing the formation of Cobra Island and the plot that goes into that, and some more sea battles, and as well as some introducing some new naval-themed characters. And we'll see the hydrofoil here, more whale action. We got some Cobras trying to kidnap Scarlet, and then we see the Asps. So that's pretty cool. And let's see, there's a scene here where that's Snake Eyes, and this Cobra agent rips off his mask, and we see how he sees how scarred up he is, and but it freaks him out, and he falls overboard. And so we got kind of some really good action. We're introduced to, well, we've already been introduced to Cutter. We got Snow Job. I don't know what Snow Job's doing on here. He's an Arctic guy, but he's dressed for polar weather. And then this C-37, this is where we're introduced to Tomax and Zaymot, and I do believe that is the first appearance of Flint. And we see Dusty in here as well. Yep, there's Flint, the Armadillo, and more of action with Ripcord and Bongo the Balloon Bear. Crimson Guards going to the circus. Apparently Cobra's got some hands in the circus. And let's see. All right, 38. This is where we are seeing Billy. He's being put on trial, essentially, for attempted murder of Cobra Commander. And the Joes he's put into the brainwave scanner to try to figure out who he's working for. And then the Joes are going on a mission to Sierra Gordo. That's what it is. That's I believe that is the South American nation where I think Rio Lindo is a city in Sierra Gordo, if I'm not mistaken. So, and then Storm Shadow doesn't want to see anything bad happen to Billy, and so he's going to break him out. And we are introduced to Recondo for the first time, and the Joes are doing some investigation, trying to find a Cobra scientist, and he's going to be instrumental in the creation of Cobra Island. And so, and let's see, I think, are they breaking out? What are these guys doing? What are the Joes doing? Are they breaking out Adelaide Burkhart again? And and I love the fact that they're actually using Blowtorch in a combat role, which is kind of a war crime. And then we find out that Bongo, her father, is the Cobra scientist that they're looking for. So Ripcord is dating the daughter of a Cobra scientist, but she doesn't know that her dad is a part of Cobra. And so there's that little monkey wrench, little plot twist there. And these guys, let's see, where are they? Yes, they are out there trying to rescue Adelaide Burkhart again. She just keeps getting herself in trouble. And then, of course, Storm Shadow takes Billy under his wing and teaches him how to be a ninja. and I love that storyline. And he's got a little hideaway in a converted water tower in New York, and the guys rescue Burkhart again, and they're trying to get out of Sierra Gordo. So yep, so good stuff happening here. And then, okay, more Mike Zeck covers, really awesome. We see the hydrofoil, and this is where we have the battle platform. We're introduced to Shipwreck. You know, lots of people love Shipwreck. I never liked him because my dad was a sailor. He was in the Navy during Vietnam, but I never liked the cartoon version of Shipwreck because he was um, just made, I don't know, just made sailors look like goons. I thought he was just used too much for comic relief, so I had a problem with that. But in the comic, I like him just fine. And so this is where seeing the plot for there's Candy's dad. He's got he's looking to create an artificial island or create a process that will create an island in the Gulf of Mexico, now called the Gulf of America, but Gulf of Mexico back then, and so that Cobra can have a sovereign nation for themselves, as opposed to, so in case the Springfield gets compromised. And then more battle ensues between the battle platform and the hydrofoil. Brother had one of those, and it was awesome. Neither the hydrofoil nor the whale would float. I asked him if he ever tried it. He said yes, and he couldn't get the water. He never could get it fully dry because they sank almost immediately. And so here we go. This big explosion and creates a rift in the, I guess it's along a fault line, and it causes a tidal wave, and the Joes are trapped in it, and the Cobras are underwater, and they rise with the ship that they're in, where their headquarters is, or this base is, rises up on the landmast. And so the flag almost gets capsized, and then their agents, Cobra's agents, get to Washington, New York, Mexico City, and Havana, looking to create diplomatic relations with all these nations because they are planting their flag on Cobra Island, which is basically their island nation. So the Joes survive barely, and then the Cobras come out, lay claim to Cobra Island. More battles ensue. The Joes are like, we got to stop these guys before anything gets out of before they can get a foothold. They want to kick the Cobras off as fast as they can, but then right before they're able to really take them down, that's when they are ordered to stand down because Cobra Island is now recognized, and the Joes there have no choice but to retreat. And then we get into 42, and we see more training with Billy. We see the Softmaster. Buzzer kidnaps Candy. More backstory about Cobra, or Storm Shadow, I should say. Hardmaster goes on a road trip, encounters Candy and Buzzer. We see more about we introduced to Wade Collins. He was one of the guys in the LERP team, and he joined Cobra, became a CG, and we learn more about that. And so later on, and this is the issue where we learned that there were more guys on the LERP team than just Storm Shadow, Stalker, and Snake Eyes. And one guy, he just, after the war, I like the fact that this shows how difficult it was for some soldiers after Vietnam. My dad told me that, he didn't really talk about Vietnam until just a few years ago when we just started to ask about it. And he said, yeah, for the first 10 years, because of all the controversy of us being over there and all the things that were happening, you just kept quiet about it. And so this kind of shows how hard it can be for soldiers to, this guy was a POW, so it acknowledges that, but then a lot of soldiers have a really hard time reacclimating back into the world. And so, and of course, Larry Hama, being a non-vet himself, incorporates that. And, and this is something my brother and I were talking about once, that the Joe comic, in a way, I mean, yes, it's a tie into a toy line, but Larry Hama still tried to make it as realistic as possible and real world as possible. And so he acknowledges how soldiers were treated after Vietnam War, and how soldiers even today, sometimes can have a difficult time reacclimating back into the civilian life. And so I just feel like this really made the military noble again. And me being a child, I didn't know anything about all that controversy with the Vietnam War until I got older. But reading this, it really made me love the idea of the military. And I had really thought about going into the Navy, like my dad and grandfather. My grandfather, he was actually stationed at Pearl Harbor during the attack. He wasn't at the attack. His boat was one of the few that was out to sea when the attack happened, and so he had to go screaming back, you know, back to Pearl Harbor after the attack happened. So yeah, so the Navy kind of runs in my family. So, but anyway, I didn't do that. But back to G.I. Joe here, and this is where we see a car wreck and Scrap Iron. He kills Softmaster, this drunk driver here that they're all hitchhiking with, Candy, and Billy. And then we follow up with Wade, and they go off his family, even though he's not the real family. He's not the real Fred to this family. He looks just like them, and they accept him back. And so they go off and escape Cobra. And then we have issue 44, and this is where we're introduced to Dr. Mindbender, but he's not called Dr. Mindbender. He's called Dr. Brainwave. And I don't know why that was. Maybe they hadn't finalized his name when the toy was being developed when this issue came out. But we see the bats for the first time, Airtight, and who is this is the Mauler, right? Who is this guy? I'm so sorry. Draw it. All Striker. Roll Cage. We got. Oh wait, no, it's got with the Roll Cage. Crankcase for the All Striker, and Heavy Metal for the Mauler. Yep. So, and the Joes get intercepted by Dr. Brainwave / Dr. Mindbender, and he's using some of his. He's kind of introducing or trying out for Cobra, showing them some of his inventions because he wants to work for Cobra, and the Joes have to work to outsmart these guys. And pretty cool standalone issue. And then we get back to Cobra Island, and let's see, Ripcord thinks that Candy is on Cobra Island, so he wants to rescue her, and so he's going AWOL to do this, just about. Not a sanctioned mission. So a lot of kind of miscommunication happens, and then there's this really cool Ripcord kind of shows just how awesome a soldier he is, and then Zartan, we're seeing more about him, and then there's this awesome night battle between this one-on-one between him and Zartan and Ripcord, which is really cool. And then we learned that Zartan was the one who killed the Hardmaster. So spoilers, should have said spoiler alert. But yeah, this is really, and then Zartan takes Ripcord's place, and but then we got another reconnaissance mission going on to try to get Ripcord back. And then we're introduced to Alpine, and everybody thinks that Ripcord is Zartan, and everybody thinks that Zartan is Ripcord. And he manages to get off of Cobra Island. And this is, let's see, Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow are trying to get onto Cobra Island. I think they're going after Cobra Commander. Or no, they're trying to kill Zartan. That's what it is. Yeah, they're going after Zartan now that they know. And then we're getting close to when they're about to start creating Serpentor. And we get into a big battle on the Sea Duel here. This is one of my all-time favorite covers, issue 47. Love this issue. Got this signed by Larry Hama too. And drawn by Rod Wiggum. And he's going to be at Joe Fest this year, 2026. So I'm going to get him to sign this issue as well. And we're introduced to the Devilfish. And the Joes, Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes are trying to get off of Cobra Island, while the Joes are trying to, I don't know if they're rescuing them or whatnot, but we're seeing a lot of different vehicles from Cobra and Joes and in this issue, but lots of good naval action here. And then the sharks show up, and oh, we got Wetsuit, one of my all-time favorite Joes too. And then Storm Shadow comes out of the surf after fighting sharks and gets shot in the chest by Baroness. And that's when Zartan is taken to the pit. And Dr. Mindbender has this idea for saving the body of Storm Shadow so he can incorporate it into Serpentor. And then there's Zartan is trying to escape the pit so he can get word back to Cobra. We're introduced to Sergeant Slaughter. No offense to Sergeant Slaughter fans, I'm glad they didn't use him much because he was really focused in the cartoon quite a bit. I mean, throwing no shade at the guy, but he just wasn't my favorite character, and I'm glad he wasn't used much in the comic. So even though I was into professional wrestling at the time. So let's see. And Zartan gets captured or recaptured after he escapes. So, and then here we are, issue 49, and this is where we are. They're kidnapping bodies similar to the cartoon. They're kidnapping different historical figures throughout and using their DNA, incorporating it into a clone, their DNA into a, to make a super soldier. So they can basically get rid of Cobra Commander and use this guy as like a figurehead to run Cobra. And let's see, and then the Joes figure out where Springfield is, and they're going en masse to take down Cobra once and for all. They attack Springfield right when Serpentor shows up, and then that leads us into issue 50 and the battle for Springfield, or Battle of Springfield. And that is one awesome running gunfight as Cobra, the Cobra civilians are trying to escape, and Serpentor goes into action and earns the respect of the troops. Storm Shadow comes back to life. The process revives him, but he has a lot of different memories now of all these historical figures. And let's see. And so there's just one big running fight for Springfield to try and stop Cobra for once and for all. But of course, they managed to escape, a good portion of them. But they robbed them of. They escaped to Cobra Island, but Springfield is shut down. And then now we have foreshadowing of. We're going to have Serpentor try and take over Cobra from Cobra Commander, and then we're introduced to Zorana. And for some reason, Storm Shadow is hooked up with the Dreadnoks for a few issues while he's trying to figure out what's going on in his head. So that is issues 1 through 50. All right, I guess I didn't make my 30-minute mark, but hopefully I'm going to keep it. It's at an hour. I'm going to keep it at that. Hopefully this was a good primer for you if you're interested in the G.I. Joe comics series. This is really awesome, and definitely, and for a lot of people, I know I'm not the only one, this was our kind of gateway drug to comics collecting. So Larry Hama, thank you very much. Got a chance to tell him that. Issue 22, became a comic collector with issue 23. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Did you get the Kickstarter, or are you just fine with the paperback compendiums? They are available. Volume 1 and 2, 3 should be out in a month or so. So yeah, if you're new here, please like, share, and subscribe. I really appreciate all of you guys, and take care. Happy New Year.